Last year, our community impact team went out and they vetted out some groups, and they selected. Last year, we did Kaleidoscope. It's a group that administers to folks with cancer. This year, we're doing Pillars of Hope, and Pillars of Hope is a Christian organization that reaches out to young ladies who are caught up in sex trafficking or human trafficking, and it's not like in a foreign land. It's actually here in the Bay Area. And so they give them an opportunity to, one, spiritual health and find wholeness in Christ, but also helping them with their GED, helping them to get away from their pimps and so forth, and they offer a safe spot. And so what we want to do is we want to come alongside of Pillars of Hope for the next couple weeks, and we're going to have an offering at the end of the service this week, an offering at the end of the service next week, and we just want to bless them. We don't want to do what they're doing as a church, but we want to come alongside of them, and we just want to practice at being good at being rich. And I know we're not rich, but we want to just practice, because practice makes perfect, and someday when you're rich, you're going to be good at it. And so we just want to come alongside of them in this season and really bless them. And so we'll talk more about that as the service goes on, all right? So last week, as we looked at being rich, Paul talks to Timothy, and we kind of give a little warning as we looked at last week. There are some side effects about being wealthy, and the first one is that wealthy folks oftentimes are not content, and we're going to talk about that today. And that is that there's something in them that when they buy, it creates a hunger for more stuff, and you just keep on buying and you keep on buying. And we talked about storage units, right? Remember that, right? One out of 10 of you own a storage unit. And you're putting in all those things in there because you're not content with what you have, and so you just keep squirreling away all the things as we work through. And then the other thing is there's some spiritual problems that take place in our life. That when we're wealthy, we end up kind of getting distracted from the priorities of God, the things that are important to the heart of God. We get sidetracked because we begin to worry about our finances and how much we're making and all that stuff. And as a result, we miss God's priorities in our life. And then we also kind of gravitate away from depending on God completely and fully. And that was last week. If you missed last week, you can grab a CD if there's any, or you can always listen online, all right? So today, we're going to continue. We're going to deal with contentment. So play along with me today, all right? So when I was when I was real little, some of the crazy things that I either was taught or I believed. All right? So let's see if you had some goofy family members like I did, all right? So I was told when I was little that the moon was made out of, see, your parents didn't like you either, right? So yeah, it was made out of cheese, and if we could ever just get there, it'd be great, right? And so I can remember that, I believed it was cheese, and I think I'm around first grade. How old are you in first grade? How old? So I was like 16, maybe going on 17 in first grade. I'm a little. So I got it in the first grade that it wasn't made out of cheese. It was made out of ice cream, right? And that's why I wanted to be an astronaut, because my mom would say, "You're a space cadet." No, just kidding, right? Here's another thing. See if you remember this. So when I'm 53, so Nike wasn't in yet. It wasn't cool. We had Adidas, Puma, and Converse, right? And they were canvas. Some of the kids are wearing them today like they're something like they're like all that in a bag of chips. You're like, I wore those when I was like 7, okay? So remember going down to Big Five, those of you who bought canvas, Converse, high top, right? And you would have 2 laces in each shoe, and we learned some kind of weave thing that was going on, right? And you would go to school, and you would go on in the playground. I don't even know if they do that anymore. But you'd go on in the playground, and you would show off your new shoes, and you would tell your friends that because you got new shoes, you could run faster, right? Anybody? And you could jump higher, right? I can jump. Look at how fast these are, right? And you actually believe that. And that's just the kind of the way that it was in your life, and you just thought, man, this is good stuff, this is good stuff. And one of the things that we remember that we learn is this, that when you're young in primary grades, that your mom had eyes in the back of her head, right? And then one day my mom showed me that. And I was from some other country, world, right? And so we just believed that. And I can remember thinking, well, my mom, she didn't even have a mirror on her visor back in those days. You didn't have any. And she could reach back and she could swat me before I was up to no good, right? Right? And so we just believed that she had eyes in the back of her head. And you just believe this. And then some of the things that I would teach my kids, and this is literally true, when the kids were young, we couldn't afford ice creams to buy that would go around in the trucks, the ice cream trucks, right? And so for the longest time, my kids just thought that was a music truck, right? And we would tell them, and this is how you parse words so you don't sin, we would tell them that they drive through the neighborhood and they make kids happy. Am I wrong? That's it, right? And so it was just a great thing that I couldn't afford $5 for a missile, right? I just couldn't do that. And so we believe that in life, right? And then in junior high, right? For whatever reason, and some of you have junior high kids, this is all you need to know, and you can go home. That you as a parent, your parents were cool when you were in 6th grade. Your dad was somebody. He was your hero. 7th grade, they didn't know anything, right? Am I wrong, right? Some of you are like, oh, I can't believe he's saying this. That's true. It's like junior high, all of a sudden, your parents are like, ding dong, right? I mean, they just don't get it. And then if you finally learn about 35 that your mom and dad were actually pretty smart. But in junior high and high school, you didn't actually believe that. Later in life that you get that. You with me on that one? How about this? This is another crazy thing that we believed. We were actually taught that you could buy happiness and security with money. And we believe that. Pause. I heard someone say, still do. Right? I mean, as silly as the moon is made out of cheese, it's just as crazy to believe that your wealth can buy happiness and security for your life. New shoes won't make you run faster or jump higher. You either got it or you don't. Right? And you can stack up all your dough and your 401k and all your things and all your toys, but it still will not give you happiness and security in your life. And let's just be honest, we're going to have a group confession here. The truth is the vast majority of us still believe that. Still believe that. And the contentment that you wrestle with in your life will never be met because you believe that security and happiness is in your money. And this is why I actually think Jesus spoke more about money than he did heaven and hell. Because he recognized that all of us 2,000 years ago in 2017, we struggle with the same stuff. That our heart can migrate over to our stuff so quick that it makes your head spin. You can be in a Jesus moment where you're communing with God and it's you and him and it's all good, and poof, 5 nanoseconds later, man, you just got all your stuff, all your trust in your stuff. Right? Happens that quick. So look with me in your outline. Money promises what only God can provide. Money promises what only God can provide. And so it promises us happiness. And we believe that in our life. That somehow, if we have enough money, that we'll be able to purchase it. Okay? Now, I'm going to come down a little bit hard on you guys for a moment. But we walk into a store and we buy one and we go, oh, that'll just make life so easy. Whoa. I mean, if that's going to make life easy, if one's good, two's better. Might as well grab 2. And look at that. It's buy one, get half off on the second one. Convenient, right? And then we take it home, be honest, we take it home, we try it, it doesn't slice, it doesn't dice, it doesn't do whatever it says it's going to do. And we go, well, maybe if it was a different color, right? And maybe if it was four-door with a sunroof and a whatever, and if it was, right? And we go out and we buy it because just as we think cheese, the moon is made of cheese, and shoes make us run faster and jump higher, new shoes, so we think that money is going to buy us happiness. And if I'm not content with what I have, well, obvious, it's like a no-brainer. I'm not getting the right stuff. I just need to get the right stuff, and then all of a sudden, happiness will come into my life. And then the second thing in your outline is that money promises us that only God can provide, and that is the area of security, right? And whatever that number is that you think that it needs to be, that in your 401k, in your retirement, in your portfolio, in your bank account, in your rainy day fund, whatever it is, you have a number, but here's the problem. It's a line that keeps moving, and every time you get close to it, your first thought is, well, what if? Well, what if the stock market goes down? I got 46% of my 401k in stocks. Well, what if? Well, I'm going to have to save twice as much. And some of you know this. If you have, like in our case, we have an annuity for pastors through our denomination. We have a what if button. If you want to know your money, all you have to do is click the what if, and it'll give you a gazillion different scenarios that could happen to tell you whether you got enough to retire or not. Built in for me. Isn't that nice of them? So then I can stress even more. But we believe that. And so Jesus says it this way in your outlines, Matthew chapter 6, verse 24. No one can serve two masters. Either he'll hate one and love the other, or he'll be devoted to one and he will despise the other. When you reach spiritual maturity, you will be able to balance out both God and money. No? I'm dyslexic, but not that far. You cannot serve both God and money. It's an emphatic. It's not like, maybe. I mean, this is an emphatic, you cannot do it, and yet, this is why I think Jesus talked more about money than he did heaven and hell. Because he understood the heart of all of us. That it is so easy for us to have our heart migrate away from putting our trust in our provider and start trusting in our provisions. And we can say, I love Jesus. Yes, I do. I love Jesus. How about you? And we could all do that. But the truth is that my heart can migrate over and trust my stuff as quick as anyone else's. And Jesus recognized that, and he understood it. And that's what makes money such an attractive, false, little case G God. It looks so appealing, doesn't it? Because in our heart, we think that it's happiness and security. And how can you go wrong with that? So in your outline, each of us can easily put our hope and our security in money and not God. And that's a thing that we wrestle with. So let me give you a couple kind of warning shots of whether you love money more than you love God. Because I know the church answer is always this: I do not serve money, Pastor Dan. I serve God, right? And so we're going to give you a little acid test as to whether it is. And it's not to make anybody feel bad, but this is the idea that God wants to transform us into the image of Christ. And Paul was so interested in the people that God had entrusted him in that he wanted their hearts to be in alignment with God. Paul actually believed that the people that God brought into his life, he was their spiritual father and steward over them. And his job wasn't to make them happy, wasn't to make them feel good, but was to bring their heart in alignment with him, with God. And that's what he believed. And when you read through his writings, I mean, he hammers away at those things. So three things, a little acid test. Number one in your outline is people who love God and trust money. Here's some of the things that pop up. Letter A in your outline is that they always want more. Right? So people who love money and trust money, they always want more in their life. They're never satisfied. As we said last week, it creates a hunger in us to keep on consuming, because in our hearts, we just think if I have 5 sets of shoes and I'm not happy, then the easy no-brainer is it's got to be 6 or 10 or 12. And so as soon as I get whatever those magic, whatever it is, then all of a sudden it's going to be right. And that's when I'm going to experience the happiness in my life. And so we're never content with what we have. In Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 10, it says, whoever loves money never has what? Enough. If you sit here today and you think on the way to work and you read the title on the internet, Be Rich, if you sit here today and you think that your issue is that you need more money, you better be careful. You may be a lover of money. And he says, whoever loves money never has enough, and whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. Don't raise your hand, but how many of you think you need a raise? Don't raise it. See, the truth is you may, and the company may, you may have earned it, and you deserve it. But if you're constantly looking for that, Jesus would just simply say, you got to be careful, because you're trusting in your stuff and you're never going to be content with it. And the crazy thing is, I've been, long enough living that, you think back 10 or 12, 20 years ago, and you think what you make today, and you probably said something when you're in your, if you're 50 or whatever, you're back in your 20, man, if I ever made fill in the blank, I mean, easy street. And you're there today, and you know what you're thinking? You're adding 20 more grand on what you make right now. And you say, man, if I ever make whatever it is, easy street, right? Because our heart can shift where we trust money more than anything. Last week, we looked at this verse, Proverbs 18:11. The wealth of the rich is their fortified city. So the cities back in those days, they would build walls and they would prevent enemy armies from coming in or bad characters from coming in. And they would close the gate at night and they would open it in the morning and you couldn't come in. And he says, the rich believe, as foolish as it is, that their wealth is like a fortified wall around their life, that they are bulletproof and nothing could penetrate them. And here's what he says. They imagine, it's like a pipe dream. They imagine it's unscalable, that there's no way that they have it, that anyone can come in and get them. Letter B. People who love money and trust money, they find it difficult to give big, all right? And it makes perfect sense, right? From a human standpoint, just imagine that this is a little illustration here. If my stack is this high, and I believe that my happiness and my security is in my stack, why would I want to give my happiness and my security away? I wouldn't want to do it. And so you know what I do? I hold on to it. Because that's my happiness and that's my security. And when you think about it from a logical standpoint, a human standpoint, you're like, yeah, it makes sense. I mean, why would you want to? And so when someone comes along and says, hey, you know what? We ought to give. It's like, happiness, security right here. I don't have anything. Right? And we say this, I can't afford it. And I say to folks over the years when it comes to tithing, this isn't a tithing message, but this is what I say to them when they say, Pastor Dan, I just can't afford to tithe. And I say this to them, I know, because you don't. Now it's a little play on words, but the reason why you can't is because you don't. Because giving isn't about money, giving is about faith. Do I believe God is the provider? right? And so if all my happiness and security is in it, why in the world would I want to give it away? It just doesn't make sense, humanly speaking. You guys okay? Yes. I wish the sound system didn't work right now, and I was just up here going, what? Yeah, what? That's funny. Letter C. Usher, get this guy out of here. Letter C. Loving money and trusting money. You could have money in the bank, but you lack peace in your heart. Right? And again, I mean, from a human standpoint, man, it makes total sense. Right? You sit in your season in your life now, and you look back 10 or 15 years ago, and you thought, if I just had the wealth, the 401k, all the different things, I would be good. I mean, I could take a deep breath and life would be sailing right along. But then when you look back to your peace in your heart back then and today, it's no better. Because peace doesn't come on how high your stack is. Peace comes only from God, right? I once heard a person who, they made $74 million a year, okay? Now that's usually what I make like on a weekend or something like that. That's a ton of money. And I heard them say this. They said, I no longer stress about my finances. And then there was a great big old but. And they went into a miserable marriage, miserable home life, miserable kids, miserable. Because, see, a Bentley won't fix a marriage. We want it to, but it doesn't fix it. Right? So, yeah, they didn't have to worry about stressing about making a mortgage or how much PG&E is. But they were just as miserable in their life because of the things that were taking place. Because money won't fix most of those issues. Right? And yet, we believe that in life. Proverbs 15:16 says this, better what's the word? You know what that word means? Little. Right? And here's what he says. Better a little with the fear of the Lord. Now, that isn't like you're cowering over God, that he's like the big curmudgeon in the sky that wants to squish you on the window. That means that's a reverence for God. Better to have a little bit in your heart where it needs to be focused on God than to have a lot with what? With turmoil. That doesn't necessarily mean that the family life is dysfunctional. It means inner turmoil in your life. That your heart isn't in alignment. Therefore, you do not have happiness. You do not have contentment. You do not have peace. And you can't stack it up enough to get it. And so he says, when your heart is in alignment with God, then whether you have a little or a lot, you'll be content. If you have a lot and your heart is drifting from God, there will be inner turmoil in our life. But just as much as we want to believe the moon is made of cheese, that new shoes is going to make me jump higher and run faster, as adults we sit in here today and we go, I would never serve money, Pastor Dan. And we all do. Here's one way of asking you. Have you ever bought something that you didn't need with money you didn't have to impress people that you didn't even know? Shall we take a field trip over to your house? Do you want to know why storage units is one of the fastest growing businesses in America? Shall we point it out? Next point, let's move on. In your outline, God has blessed me more than I need. Any amens to that? Amen. I am, what am I? I am, what am I? Turn to your neighbor and tell them that they're rich. Listen to that. You guys are weak, man. Say it like you mean it. Yeah. All right, slow down. I will not trust in my riches, but in him who richly provides. You are rich. God has blessed you. The concern is that we can easily get distracted from that, and therefore we are never content. So today's lesson, here we go. Paul writes to Timothy. Timothy is the understudy of Paul. He's the seminary student that's going to do an amazing thing. He gets 2 letters, and he tells him how to basically become a pastor as he writes to Timothy. Paul's heart was to line the people with Jesus, that they would be walking in sync with him, and their hearts would be right. And so Paul tells Timothy something that's kind of weird. He says to them, he says, hey, there's going to be a day when you're walking in the ministry, you're out and doing life, and you're going to come across rich believers in Jesus Christ. They love Jesus, they are followers of Christ, and they are wealthy in that current age, in that present time. And I want you to tell them this: you need to be good at being rich. I don't want you to be bad at it. I want you to be good at it when you go out in your life. And so we pick up in Timothy chapter 6, 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 17. Paul says to them, and this is from last week, he says, command those, instruct them, encourage them, those who are rich in this present world, not to be arrogant, so don't walk around thinking you're somebody, nor to put their hope in their wealth. Well, why would you put your hope in your wealth and all that stuff? And he says, because it's so uncertain. So you don't want to do that. The stock market's up, down, and all that kind of stuff, right? But, this is a transition, but put their hope in what? Put their hope in God, right? Who richly provides, now watch this, us with everything for our. I said last week, Pastor Dan, I got a 4-car garage. 4-car garage, Pastor Dan. Someone asked me on the way out, what do you need 4 cars? 4-car garage. I said, I don't have a doghouse, so I've got to have a little room to roam around because I'm in there pretty often. No, I'm just kidding, right? So here's the point. God is not opposed to us having nice stuff. He doesn't care how high your stack is. He doesn't care if you have a 4-car garage, a 1-car garage, 9-bedroom, 9,000 square feet, 900 square feet. He doesn't want you to worship it. He doesn't want your hope and your security tied up in it. That's all he's saying, right? He blesses us for our good, but he doesn't want us to get distracted and have our heart migrate over where we begin to trust in the provisions and not the provider. And yet every one of us, we struggle with that. So Paul goes on and he's going to tell them how not to do that. In other words, he's going to say, here's how you're going to be content in your life. So in your outline, so how do I keep my hope from drifting away from my wealth? And he goes on in verse 18, and he says this. He says, command them to do what? To do good, right? He doesn't tell them to be good. So I'm not telling you to be good. The assumption is you are going to be good, right? So I'm not going to tell you to be good, but I'm going to tell you to do good with your life. We'll see next week. We are not saved by our works, but we are saved to do good works. All right? So we don't have a relationship with God because we are good. We have a relationship with God because we've invited Jesus into our life, and because of his grace and his mercy, he desires for us to do good for his kingdom. And so he says, command them, instruct them to do good, to be rich in what? To be rich in good deeds. Right? So when you begin to look at how do you become content with what you have, it's not stacking more up. It's actually something that's kind of different. And so he says in your outline, to be, and number 1, is by being rich, bold. Be different. Right? It doesn't mean that you bring attention to yourself, look how wonderful I am, but it means to be bold, to be different than the world. Right? And way above average in deeds. If you want your heart to begin, to stop your heart from migrating over and trusting in your stuff, Paul says simply this: you need to make sure, Timothy, that you're telling them to do good, to be rich in good deeds. Now, here's what I know about all of us. Pastor, I would love to do good deeds. I just don't have any time. Right? Now, I heard about a rich country. Let me just kind of whet your appetite for this. This is crazy. This country was wealthy. The workers who worked in different areas of business and so forth, they only had to work 5 days a week. Can you imagine that? 5 days a week they worked, and they amassed so much money in 5 days. Listen, they actually was able to buy extra food, and they put it in something called a freezer. I know that's bizarre. I know, because we're hustling today for the food today. I get that. But they actually were able to put food into a freezer, and then when people came over unannounced, they could pull it out, microwave it, barbecue, and feed a whole room of people in 5 days. In fact, their workers, they actually believed it was part of their constitutional rights to have 2 days off. I know. I don't know what union they were a part of, but I'm going to join it because that is crazy. See, our problem isn't we don't have time. Our problem is we don't spend our time on what's important. In fact, if you work 60 hours a week and you sleep 8 hours a day, you'll have around 40 to 50 hours of unclaimed time that you could do good. And in some crazy environments and wealthy environments, and this is even more nutty for us, I've heard a family of 5, the husband worked, the wife stayed home with 3 kids, and none of the kids had to work at the age of 9. Is that nuts or what? Now, we chuckle, but that isn't in American history. That wasn't too long ago where that was the norm. You know, my dad, I shared the story before, my dad was from a wealthy family. His dad died, and the family lost a bunch of money in a deal. My dad was rolling cigars, I think, at like 9 years old. And that was because that's the only way they could make it. Right? So it wasn't that long ago that was the case. And we sit here today and we're like, we're not rich. Most of us work 5 days. We have more than enough at the end of the week to be able to take off 2 days. Our freezers are so full, come on, be honest, that when the store has, something on sale, you can't get an extra quart of ice cream in there if you had to. Right? Are you with me? Right? You got to take some stuff out that's got freezer burn in order to get the good stuff in there. Right? We have more than enough. And when it comes to time, we have more than enough. We just spend it on things that don't matter. And then when it comes to doing good deeds, you're like, oh, I'm just overwhelmed. Well, yeah, if you spent 2 hours a day on Facebook, you should be overwhelmed. Right? And that's the average. Some of you are way below average, and some of you are way above average. I don't spend any time on it, so someone's got 4 hours down here. All right? You with me? So he goes on and he says this. He tells them to be generous. He's telling rich people to be generous. I mean, isn't that like a no-brainer? Aren't all rich people generous? And the answer is no. No. Actually, studies in America have shown that rich people are less generous than poor people. Now, not in the dollar amount, but in the percentage. See, we hear Bill Gates gave $40 million, and everyone goes, $40 million? I mean, I wish he'd give us $40 million, and that is a ton of money. But when you're worth billions, be honest, there are days where he loses hundreds of millions of dollars based on stock market up, stock market down. So 40 million, 10 million, that is a boatload of money, and bless those ministers or those opportunities that he gives out to charity place organizations. I'm not throwing them under the bus, but we hear that and we go, wow, the rich are just giving tons away. And the statistics tell us that that's not the case. Percentage-wise, they actually give less than poorer folks or middle-class folks. And so when Paul tells Timothy, hey, tell the rich people to be generous, you're like, they struggled with it too. And he goes on and he says, and be willing to share, right? Not to be stingy with their stuff and their time. Okay, y'all together with me on this? Yes. Now just disregard everything that I just said. Now pay attention to what I'm saying now, all right? When you think about what impresses the heart of God more than anything when it comes to finances, we would think that obviously giving a boatload of dough is it. But here's the reality. God doesn't care about how much, and grab a hold of this, he cares about the percentage in which you give. Okay? Now let me read a passage of Scripture and explain it to you. If you have your Bibles, Mark chapter 12, verse 41. Jesus has got all of his disciples, and he's hanging out in the temple, and they're going to have a time of worship. So their worship service would be similar to ours. There would be songs, there would be reading of the Torah, there would be some testimonies perhaps. A rabbi would get up and share a message with them, and there would be an offering. Their offerings were different. They didn't pass little bags or buckets or plates around and everyone grab it and, put their stuff in. They'd actually line up. So we'd have like an offering, and we would have the offering thing at the front of the church, and y'all would line up behind it, and when your time would come, you would drop your offering in the plate. All right? So Jesus gets his disciples, and he says, fellas, come here. And so he goes opposite of the offering. He elbows them all, because they're not very smart guys. He elbows them all, and he says, hey, I want you to pay attention. So Jesus, in verse 41, Jesus sat down opposite the place where the offerings were being put, and he watched the crowd put their money into the temple treasury. Okay, so they're going to bring their offering in. He's watching them. The verse goes on, and it says, many, what's the word? Many people threw their offering into the treasure. That word throw, it means violently slamming it in. Okay? Now, I don't have clay pots. We just have metal pots up here. But you kind of stop and you go, it wasn't like drop. It wasn't place. They threw it in. Why would they do that? To make a lot of noise. So that everyone would go, wow. That guy is loaded. With money, right? So they would come in, he would walk them down, they would walk down, and here's what they would hear. And everyone would go, wow, that guy's rich. That guy is rich. And they would clear it out, and the next person would come in. Verse 42. But a poor widow came in and put 2, what's the word? So King James calls them widow mites. That's actually a word that was made up for King James. They didn't have a word that would describe the actual currency. It was basically the amount of 6 minutes of labor for the average person. Okay? And so here's what they heard. No one flinched. No one said, wow. So Jesus says, I tell you the truth. This poor widow has put more into the treasury than what? Than all of the others. Well, Jesus, time out. I mean, you're the Son of God? More? I mean, I'm not the smartest guy with 17 in the third grade. I know, I get that. But you're the Son of God. I mean, you could read people's minds. And she is rich? She gave more than all the others? How is that possible? So he tells us. They all gave out of their wealth, but she, out of her poverty, she put in everything, all she had to live on. What impresses the heart of God? It's not how many zeros, it's the percentage. And here is why. Because her giving is a picture of her alignment with God. Their giving is out of the overflow of what they have. Her giving is, I have complete trust in God providing. And I'm going to give my security and my happiness to Him. They gave out of their wealth. Their heart wasn't in alignment. And so giving isn't about dollars. And to be honest with you, it's not even really about percentage. It's about an alignment with your heart. When your heart is in alignment, then your happiness and your contentment isn't in your stuff. And she completely trusted God. Right? And Jesus goes on and he says, she is rich toward God. Number 2, you have to decide in advance how much and to whom you're going to give to. Now, there are moments in our life where spontaneously you have to. We've had disasters in Texas and Florida and Mexico. I mean, there are times where things happen and you just spontaneously go, hey, I got to give toward that cause. And that's great. But that shouldn't be the way that we decide that we're going to be rich in good deeds, generous and willing to share. We need to settle down, get our heart focused on God, and ask God, God, where do you want me to be generous with my time, and where do you want me to be generous with my resources in which you have blessed me with? Right? And so there is some spontaneity, but you also have to make sure that you're focused on that. And so let me give you a take-home truth, and we're going to wrap this thing up. And this is, folks, this is so big. Let me just say it this way. If you have ever started a budget and failed, you better pay close attention, because I'm going to tell you why you failed at your budget. And it's not what you think it is. Here it is. Take-home truth. Our giving and our serving redirects our heart. The vast majority of us work 5 days and we have more than we need. There was a season in my life early in my ministry where literally we didn't have any extra nothing, right? And the truck was the music truck. Okay, there was a season when I was involved in ministry, youth ministry, that was the case. And there may be some of you where that's it. When you look at your budget, I mean, you're barely eking by. I totally get it, and this isn't for you. But the vast majority of us, we work 5 days, we got stuff in the refrigerator and freezer, we have more than enough. And we sit down and we get on a budget. And we go, okay, this is the budget. This is our spending money. This is this, this is this, this is this. Ready, break. Ha! And then we walk into the store. Come on, be honest now. I mean, I'm just a human. I'm just a guy. We walk in the store and we go, clearance. Right? And I know the line. But honey, look how much money I saved you. I know, right? I get it. I totally get it. And you think in that moment that you need that because you're not content and your happiness is in your stuff. And after all, what's one more pair of shoes? Come on now. And so then you go into the next store, and then you go into the bait shop, and then you go into the whatever, and then you go into this shop and that shop, and you just do it. And here's what ends up happening. And listen to me, all right? I don't know anything, but I know this. Your salary is here. Your consumption is here. You get a raise, and your cost of living stays the same. Nope. Same house, same car, same kids, same wife, same husband. I needed another pair. Right? You get a raise. Same wife, same kids, same house, same school, same car, cost of living. Is anybody here today, or am I just talking to myself? Right? And trust me, I know you deserve it. And you work hard. I got it. I get it. I've said the same stuff. And you fail at budgeting, not because of how much you make, but how much you spend. And you're never content. And so you just need in your life. Now again, some of you, you're on a razor-thin edge, and this message is not for you. Right? It's for the vast majority of us that work 5, we got money left over, and yet our consuming goes. And here's how you realign your heart. By serving and by giving. Because what it does is it shapes your heart to the priorities of God and the heart of God. And the widow's mite is exactly the story of that. She had complete trust that God was going to provide. And when you go out and you prioritize your life on the things that matter to God, and you're giving to the things that matter to God, it aligns your heart. And when you go into the store and you go, clearance, well, that's cool, and you keep on walking because you don't need it for your contentment, your happiness, and your security. Is anybody here today with me? Right? And here's what some of you are going to do. I know. Some of you are going to come up to me after church and you're going to go, Pastor, you need to say that every Sunday because I did it and our finances completely changed. And some of you are like, this little guy needs to get off the stage because I'm going to kill him. Right? And I'm just telling you, your contentment is found only in Jesus Christ. Period. Your shoes don't run faster, they don't jump higher. The moon isn't made out of cheese. Your mom doesn't have eyes in the back of her head. Okay? The music truck has ice cream in it. All right? Just to let you know. Okay? And money will not buy you security, nor will it buy you happiness. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your grace, for your love, for your mercy. Father, thank you for your provisions that you provide for us. And Lord, as we sit here today, we recognize that we're in a great, great country, the greatest country ever given to mankind, has flaws, has problems, but we are a prosperous nation. And we sit here today, and most of us have more than we need. Father, my prayer is that you would align my heart, that you would align every heart in here today, that our priorities would be your priorities, that our security would be placed in you, that our contentment and happiness would be found only in you. And Father, as we leave here today, you want to change us. And I pray, God, that you will begin to do that in our life. Thank you for your love, your grace. Thank you for this opportunity to get together as a church family, to be encouraged from your word. It's in Jesus' name I pray. And all God's people said, amen. There's an envelope around you, and it says community impact, so pay attention. Here's what I want you to do. If you want to give toward that, toward the community impact, the Pillars of Hope today, that's fine. But I really do want you to go home this week and pray of what you are to give toward the Pillars of Hope. Some of you want to serve